When it comes to Russian aviation, the first thing that comes to mind is vehicles carrying few people and a lot of weapons. Civil aviation comes next: Ilyushins, Tupolevs, Superjets and MCs. But when it comes to business jets, in the list of names we usually remember Dassault, Bombardier, Cessna, Embraer, luxury machines but not really local ones. Of the Russian machines we can remember maybe the government planes, but for some reason there are no tours to look at them. Is that all? Not really. There are a couple more aircraft in the country which can be attributed both to large business aviation and to the local industry. Hello aviators, Sky here, and today we are getting acquainted with rare birds, Russian corporate aircraft. Standing before us is the Tu-204 of the Russian Space Agency, Roscosmos. Let's first understand what we're talking about today. The Tu-204, even our special Tu-204, is not exactly a business jet, since it was not originally created as such and does not contain some of the features of this breed of aircraft. But when did that stop anyone? If there is a large plane, there is a solution. You just need to add a little magic. The result of this magic was the birth of the special class in business aviation, VIP-airliners, commercial airliners modified to meet the requirements of business aviation. Boeing business jets, Airbus corporate jets, Embraer lineages, and many of their relatives, including the planes of state leaders, are precisely in their class. Considering these reservations, we can say that, although they don't make pure business jets in Russia, there are still VIP airliners here. Stylish SBJs, most of the fleet of the government's Special Flight Squad, and finally Roscosmos aircraft, the heirs of a long history. In general, such a class in the space industry arose at the dawn of the Soviet campaign to the stars. Then, back in the 1940s and 1950s, a special airline was formed, whose task was to ensure quick communications between objects. A huge number of personnel, from simple engineers to management and astronauts, had to be quickly transported across a gigantic territory. Soon, the airline received a base at Vnukovo Airport, where it is still located at its own terminal with an eloquent name, Cosmos. They had many different planes, but at the beginning of the 21st century, the Tu-134s were their main workhorses. At this point, any person will say that the Tu-134 and VIP airliner do not go together very well in one sentence. Besides, how relevant is this in the 21st century? Yes, the filling of this aircraft was redone and looked great, but firstly, the 134 is more of a regional plane with a range of a couple of thousand kilometers, which is not enough for fast jumps to Baikonur or, moreover, the Vostochny Cosmodrome. And secondly, it's a machine from the 1960s. These planes are almost 40 years old. Yes, with decent maintenance, planes can fly for a long time, but everything has its limits. Well, suppose we need to change planes. Change to what? Obvious options like large jets had to be dismissed. The requirements for aircraft are quite specific. They fly in the interest of a government corporation, which is accompanied by the risk of sanctions, all the more so now. Besides, we know the price tags of the flagships of Bombardier and Dassault, and Roscosmos doesn't really suffer from overloading huge profits. It was decided to work on Russian aircraft. Which ones? There's not that much of a choice here. There is the SSJ-100, not a bad option, especially since the USC for a very long time has been persistently promoting its VIP versions. But there are too many foreign elements, and it is a regional plane, the range may not be enough. There is the Il-96, but the Il-96 is overkill. And there is the Tu-204, which in this role could be quite good. Moreover, these aircraft were available. Availability was also facilitated by the fact that the aircraft they took were not new, but from the secondary market. In 2014, at the Aviastar aviation plant, there was a pair of Tu-204-300 airliners born in 2008. The planes stood idle, and then, just in time, Roscosmos arrived. In this scenario, the corporation could get two large planes while spending a relatively modest amount of money. Both machines were modified. About 2,000 changes were made to the design, the main of which of course was a completely new interior. The planes also received new liveries and their own names, Yuri Gagarin and Sergei Korolev. Both of them entered the fleet in 2019 and are flying in the interests of the Cosmonaut Training Center. It's time to take a closer look at them. Outwardly, everything is quite familiar. Again, VIP aircraft rarely differ from ordinary ones on the outside. The Roscosmos planes are painted white, with a cosmic star dark blue accent on the lower fuselage, engines, winglets and fins, plus the corporate logo on it. Looks pretty. These planes are a big love of spotters. The rest of the layout is quite classic. The aircraft has a tricycle landing gear. The main gear legs have bogies with 4 wheels at once. This emphasizes some significance of the 2204. Usually, it is customary to compare it with aircraft such as the Boeing 737 and Airbus A320. Look how similar they are. But this is not entirely correct. The 2204 is larger and heavier than both. Its maximum takeoff weight is as much as 107 tons. The base A320, for example, weighs only 78. In this regard, it is more adequate to compare it at least with the A321, or even better with the Boeing 757. Therefore, the landing gear is appropriate. The power plant is the most obvious. The PS-90A engines, with a thrust of approximately 156 kilonewtons. These engines in domestic aviation are legendary. One can argue if in these legends they are the Prince Charming or rather the Terrible Dragon, but nevertheless, in different versions they are installed on many aircraft. You can ask another question. Why did they take the 2204-300 from the whole family? This is another nuance of VIP airliners. Commercial aircraft are oriented to maximum passenger traffic. That is, it is desirable that more people could be put into the cabin. That is why in the families of airliners, in addition to the basic options, there are larger ones, for example the A320 and A321. But at the same time, with restrictions on the maximum weight, an increase in the size of the aircraft often leads to a decrease in their range. For the sake of range, aircraft on the contrary are made smaller than the base, like the A320 and A319 or A318. For business transportation, the commercial load is not so important. The number of passengers and cargo in them is usually very modest. But more range is needed. Therefore, VIP airliners are often based on smaller versions of conventional aircraft. It's the same here. In the Tupolev family, the 2204-300 is the smallest. This is most clearly seen on the fuselage. With its 40 meters, it is as much as 6 meters shorter than the brothers. Its capacity was seriously reduced, but while maintaining the mass, this made it possible to increase the fuel supply, which means that the range, about 7,000 kilometers or 3,800 miles, is quite enough for flights to space industry facilities. Okay, enough street walking. The most interesting thing about the Roscosmos planes is their filling. Conceptually, the main task of Korolev and Gagarin was the creation of space vehicles and their piloting. The main task of our current Korolev and Gagarin is the transportation of personnel of the corporation, as well as the main employees, cosmonauts themselves. This is what the cabins were made for. Both aircraft are almost completely identical, and they have the same filling. Let's get acquainted with Gagarin. The aircraft received an interior divided into 3 cabins. At the front, behind the standard kitchen and crew quarters, is the first cabin for the big bosses. By and large, this is an office with a wardrobe, office supplies, a table, a sofa on one side and a main chair on the other, plus a large display with a multimedia system. The aircraft is outfitted with equipment to provide internet and satellite communications. This office is isolated from the rest of the cabin, like a train compartment. On the other side from this office is a standard set, 2 large seats facing each other, separated by a folding table. Finishing is made on a decent level: wood, lacquer, metal and leather. But at the same time, minimalistic and conservative. There are no special technical and design quirks to see here. Further, it becomes even simpler. Already in the next cabin, there is no more beige velvet finishing on the walls. The next part of the cabin, right behind the wardrobe and lavatory, is more unusual for corporate planes. Cabins for cosmonauts are located here, 5 of them, probably based on the number of crew members on future spacecraft. These cabins are simpler than the chief's office. A small closet for personal belongings, a table, a sofa, and a display with a similar multimedia system. Quite minimalistic, but enough to get to the cosmodrome well rested. Considering that after this flight, the cosmonauts will have another, more interesting flight, it is important that they start the mission in good condition. On the other side of the cabin, behind the narrow aisle, there is a row of large seats with tables for accompanying people, as was the case in front. Behind this compartment area and another lavatory is the third cabin, the largest and the most ordinary, like in a passenger plane. 2 rows of large seats like in a business class with a 2+2 layout in front, and 5 rows of economy seats with a 3+3 layout in the back. Meanwhile, this cabin allows the possibility of reconfiguration with the installation of a special medical compartment for the rehabilitation of cosmonauts. This ordinary cabin is followed by the similarly standard kitchen area with a couple of crew seats and tail doors. In total, the cabin provides accommodation for 53 passengers. That is approximately 3 times less than the usual passenger cabin of the same aircraft, although this is quite a lot for VIP airliners. With such a general inspection, it is clear that this cabin is more of a minimalistic corporate than some particularly fashionable VIP. Except for the unusual layout and comfortable chairs with tables, everything is modest. Plastics, stamped metals, and simple design. Again, the budget was limited, the goals were clear, and from the reputational point of view, you can't please everyone. If you do it with luxury, they will say that state money is being spent on stupid show-offs. If you do it simpler, they will say that for the sake of the cosmonauts, you should have done it with luxury. For me, it's better this way. I don't think that cosmonauts suffer much from the lack of gold-plated doorknobs and smart lighting, and money in the space industry can find a better use. And if you're expecting a cabin like on the Gulfstreams or planes from the fleets of the Middle Eastern monarchs, sorry. The cockpits of such aircraft are usually no different from their commercial relatives, and our plane does not stand out. The usual cockpit of the Tu-204. 6 small multi-function displays, branded Tupolev yokes, and of course, classic for Russian aircraft greenish color. Everything is more or less on par. Although the cockpit is designed for 3 crew members, which on an airliner in 2022 is of course pretty sad. In fairness, we can say that the UAC at one time created a modernization Tu-204SM with the introduction of many improvements, including a 2-seat cockpit. But this project didn't find a big continuation. The SM gave way to the MC. Both aircraft are actively operated, transporting personnel and cosmonauts between the corporation's facilities, including Zvezdny Gorodok, the Star City Training Center, and the Baikonur and Vostochny cosmodromes. They are operated so actively that, even with the support of my colleagues and the airline itself, I had to chase them for quite a long time, catching the plane at Vnukovo before departure, which, as a bonus, allowed me to see the preparations for the flight. Well, a pair of two 204-300s in the Roscosmos fleet is the first update since the early 1990s. The old 134th can finally retire, giving way to the heirs. Let's hope that now, having dealt with the bottleneck in the delivery of cosmonauts to spaceports, Roscosmos will be able to increase the ability to deliver cosmonauts, you know, to space, giving them new tasks, spacecraft, and rockets. We'll see. Many thanks to the management of the Roscosmos Corporation, the staff of the Cosmos Terminal, the crew, and a couple of other guys for the opportunity to shoot some of the most interesting aircraft in the country. And you aviation fans, like and subscribe to the channel. Fast flights on unusual planes, and soft landings to you.